Director Wray, quoting former Attorney General Bell, said you should be willing to resign if necessary over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?
My answer is simple. In my 16 years of government service, we will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias.
Every news channel showed you this clip. Nobody told you what it actually means. The FBI has 38,000 employees, a $9 billion budget, and the legal authority to investigate anyone in America, including politicians, donors, and sitting officials. Whoever leads it holds more domestic power than almost any other single person in the federal government. The senator questioning Kash Patel here is not a partisan opponent. He confirmed Trump's previous FBI director and multiple first-term cabinet picks. He is asking these questions because Patel's own public statements, made months before this hearing, raised specific red flags about whether this FBI will operate independently or as an extension of the White House. 7 years covering this beat tells me what gets said under oath in a confirmation hearing becomes the only accountability tool the public has once the doors close. Let's go through it.
Mr. Patel, to you and your family, congratulations on your nomination. And we had a constructive conversation last week. I appreciate your taking the time. In particular, a conversation about the prosecution of the World Cup bombing in Uganda that took the life of a Delawarean whose family I knew. I found moving. But the role you've been nominated for is central. And I voted to confirm Trump's previous FBI director, Chris Wray. I believe he's lived up to the Bureau's motto of serving with fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And I also think my vote for him and for many of Trump's cabinet in his first term shows I take my constitutional advice and consent role seriously and do not reflexively vote against his nominees. I look at three factors when I assess a nominee: qualifications and experience, policy views and whether they're in the best interest of the American people, and character and capacity to do the job independently where called for. My colleagues have referenced quotes from Attorney General Barr, National Security Advisor Bolton. The FBI is enormous, 38,000 agents, $9 billion budget. I am troubled by your lack of senior law enforcement leadership. We disagree on some important policy views, but the thing that bothers me the most is a whole series of statements you've made in a variety of settings that suggest you would struggle to be independent from White House direction or control, as has long been the modern history of the FBI.
Before asking a single question, this senator does something unusual. He establishes why his concerns should be taken seriously. He's not a reflexive opponent. He's someone who has supported Trump nominees before and is now saying publicly that this one is different. The concern isn't experience, it isn't policy. It's independence, whether the next FBI director will make decisions based on law or based on who's calling from the White House. That distinction is the entire stakes of this hearing. And in the next clip, Patel's very first answer tells you exactly why that concern exists.
Who does the director of the FBI work for, Mr. Patel?
The immediate report for the director of the FBI is into the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. Then that report is taken into the Office of the Attorney General and ultimately the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the long-standing application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do, at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people. President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light. As a public defender, I learned that in the harshest of arenas. And any law enforcement investigation, if I'm confirmed at the FBI, will only be launched on the following qualification: a factual, articulable, legal basis to do so. The president has said publicly that he will allow the FBI to remain independent, and I have said as much as well.
The chain of command answer Patel gives here ends at the White House. That's a legal fact, but it's also a political signal. Every FBI director before him has been careful to separate institutional loyalty from political loyalty. Patel didn't make that separation cleanly, and AG Bondi, asked the same question, answered differently: the Constitution and the American people. Two of the most powerful law enforcement officials in this administration giving opposite answers to the most fundamental question of institutional independence. That's not a technicality. That's a crack in the foundation. And the real weight of this clip is what comes after. Trump has publicly named people he wants investigated. Patel's answer to whether he'd open those cases isn't no. It's that the legal standard would have to be met. The problem is, if he's confirmed, he's the one deciding whether it's met.
If FBI agents brought to you a factual legal basis, predication, and you are about to refer it to a prosecutor, and you get a call from the White House saying, don't proceed. This is a major donor. This is someone close to the president. This is inappropriate. What would you do?
Simple. I think you answered it partially in your question. The line agents, the brick agents who are trained to bring investigations on behalf of the FBI will make that decision-making process, and they will only have my full support so long as it upholds absolutely every value of the Constitution. And that's it.
So your predecessor, I went back and looked, and I asked the same questions of Director Comey and Director Wray. Quoting former Attorney General Bell, said, you should be willing to resign, if necessary, over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?
Senator, my answer is simply, I would never do anything unconstitutional or unlawful, and I never have in my 16 years of government service.
Would you be willing to resign the post of FBI director if pressed and given no choice but to obey the order or resign?
Senator, I will always obey the law.
Does obeying the law require you to, as Attorney General Bell said, as FBI Director Wray said, refuse the order or resign?
I'm not familiar with the extent of the law that you're referring to, but my answer is simple in my 16 years of government service. We will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
Mr. Patel, your predecessors in this role have been clear that they would be willing to resign if forced or directed to do something unethical or illegal.
Every FBI director in modern history has answered the resignation question the same way. Yes, I would resign before carrying out an unconstitutional order. It is the single clearest test of institutional independence there is. Patel was asked 3 times. 3 different framings. He answered each time with a version of, I follow the law, which is not the same answer. Here's why that matters beyond this room. The resignation question isn't about what Patel would do in a crisis. It's about whether the White House believes he would. A director who won't commit to resignation is a director the White House knows it can pressure. That changes the entire dynamic of every difficult decision the FBI makes from day one. What he didn't say in this clip is more important than what he did.
One of your past statements that's concerned me, it's both a post on Truth Social and something you said in a podcast, the Sean Morgan report, that your predecessor, Chris Wray, has broken the law. We need to prosecute him. The FBI should go after people like him. And the month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
Senator, this reminds me of the conversation you and I had, which I greatly appreciated. There is enough violent crime in this country and enough national security threats to this country that the FBI is going to be busy going forward preventing 100,000 overdoses, 100,000 rapes, and 17,000 homicides.
We agree that prosecuting violent crime should be the principal focus of the FBI. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Patel, is a whole series of very troubling, to me and many other statements you've made about instead using it to pursue those who might be viewed as political opponents.
And as I told you in your office, I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as the FBI director. I told you that in your office, and I'll tell you that again today.
One of the things I've worked hard on, and I hope to continue being able to work hard on with this administration, is partnership between federal, state, and local law enforcement to pursue violent crime. You did say, as my colleague asked, and I look for a longer answer, that you want to close the FBI Bureau's headquarters on day one. How would shutting down the FBI headquarters impact its ability to prosecute violent crime and drug traffickers? How is that possibly a serious proposal, Mr.
Thank
Patel?
you for bringing that up and allowing me to answer. It was to highlight the significantly greater point that I was actually making in that interview, which is well documented over and over again. 38,000 FBI employees. 7,500 FBI employees work in the Washington field office and Hoover building alone. If you increase that aperture just slightly to encompass the National Capital Region, that is 11,000 FBI employees work in the National Capital Region. A third of the workforce for the FBI works in Washington, D.C. I am fully committed to having that workforce go out into the interior of the country, where I live, west of the Mississippi, and work with sheriff's departments and local officers, and having one agent prevent one homicide, and having one agent in Washington prevent one rape. And I will do that over and over and over again, because the American people deserve the resources, not in Washington, D.C., but in the rest of the country.
And Mr. Patel, frankly, if that had been your statement, that would be something that would be defensible. It's the rest of it, saying you're going to turn it into a museum of the deep state, that causes repeated questions and concerns from people like myself.
Months before this hearing, Patel called for criminal prosecution of the man he is now replacing. That's not opposition research. Those are his own words on a public podcast. Today, under oath, he pivoted entirely. Violent crime, overdoses, homicides. The FBI has bigger things to focus on. No retribution. No politicization. He said it in private, and he said it again today on the record. That pledge is now the only accountability tool the public has. Every investigation the FBI opens, or doesn't open, will be measured against those words. The Hoover Building argument is actually the most defensible thing he said in this entire hearing. A third of the FBI's workforce in Washington, D.C., while violent crime surges across the country, is a legitimate structural problem. But the senator's point lands cleanly. That argument would have been enough. It's the everything else, the deep state language, the prosecution threats, the loyalty questions, that made a straightforward policy proposal impossible to separate from a political agenda. Kash Patel will almost certainly be confirmed. What happens after confirmation is the real story. And this hearing just set the terms of how that story gets judged.